My wife stole our daughter's college fund and ran off with another man. Then my 12-year-old said something that gave me chills. I was sitting at my desk, scrolling through bills, when a notification popped up. Your balance has fallen below the minimum threshold. That didn't make sense. We had spent 6 years carefully saving for our daughter's college fund. That account was untouchable. At least, that's what I thought. With trembling hands, I logged in, expecting a mistake. But what I saw hit me like a freight train. The account was empty. Not a few missing dollars, completely gone. Dread twisted in my gut as I checked our joint credit card statements. My breath caught in my throat. Flights, luxury hotels, 5-star restaurants. She had taken everything and disappeared, running off with another man, using the money meant for our daughter's future. My pulse pounded as I grabbed my phone and dialed her number, straight to voicemail, again and again. That's when I heard a small voice behind me. "Dad?" I turned around. My 12-year-old daughter stood in the doorway watching me. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Where's your mom?" She took a slow bite of her apple. Shrugged. She said she had to go somewhere. That word, somewhere, felt like a knife to the chest. But what she said next, it sent a chill down my spine. She gave me a small, knowing smile and said, "Don't worry, Dad. I'll take care of it." I stared at my daughter, her calm expression unsettling me more than the empty account staring back at me. "What do you mean, you'll take care of it?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Lily took another slow bite of her apple, unfazed. "I mean, you don't have to worry." Something about the way she said it, so casual, so certain, made my stomach turn. I turned back to my laptop, my fingers trembling as I refreshed the page. Still, 0. My breath grew shallow. My head felt light. This had to be a mistake. I clicked into our joint credit card account hoping, praying, for a logical explanation. The screen loaded, and with each transaction that appeared, my stomach twisted tighter. $200, luxury hotel reservation $600, fine dining restaurant $900, airline tickets, one way. The list went on. Spas, designer boutiques, rental cars. It was all there. This wasn't a banking error. This was deliberate. I clenched my jaw, my heart pounding as I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. A sharp pang of realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't coming back. I let the phone slip from my fingers, running a shaky hand down my face. How had I missed this? The secrecy, the sudden distance, the way she had started dressing up for errands without explanation. She hadn't just left. She had planned this. The weight of it pressed down on my chest, but then a small voice cut through the silence. "You don't have to call her, Dad," Lily said simply. I looked up. My daughter was still standing there, her expression unreadable. "She's not going to answer," she continued. She made her choice. The certainty in her voice sent a shiver down my spine. For a moment, I just stared at her. How could she be so sure? And why did it feel like she wasn't just accepting it, but expecting it? For the rest of the night, I barely spoke. I sat there, staring at my laptop screen, hoping that somehow the numbers would change. That if I refreshed enough times, the money would come back, and this would all be some kind of horrible mistake. But it wasn't. I barely touched my dinner. My thoughts were spinning too fast, replaying every moment of the past few months, every red flag I had ignored. Emily's late nights, the vague excuses, the way she had become too careful about where she left her phone. How had I been so blind? Across the table, Lily ate her meal quietly, unfazed. "You okay?" she asked at one point, tilting her head slightly. I looked at her. She hadn't cried, hadn't asked where her mother was or when she'd be back. I forced a nod. "Yeah." She studied me for a second, then went back to eating like nothing was wrong. I told myself she was in shock. That's how kids process things, right? But something about the way she sat there, completely unshaken, made my skin prickle. That night, I barely slept. But Lily, she slept fine. The next morning, I woke up groggy, exhausted. I made my coffee in silence, my mind already running through. What came next? Police reports, financial recovery, figuring out what to tell our daughter. But when I stepped into the hallway, I heard something odd. Typing. I peeked into Lily's room. She was sitting on her bed, laptop propped on her legs, fingers moving across the keyboard at lightning speed. "Hey," I said, leaning against the door frame. She jumped slightly and slammed the laptop shut. "What are you working on?" I asked. "Homework," she said too quickly. I frowned. "At 6:30 in the morning?" She shrugged. "Just catching up." Her voice was calm, but I noticed the way her fingers tensed around the edge of her laptop, the way she angled it away from me. I let it go. Maybe she really was just distracting herself, or maybe she wasn't. That afternoon, another strange thing happened. I walked into the garage to grab a screwdriver but stopped cold. Lily was at the workbench, surrounded by wires, circuits, and a whiteboard filled with diagrams and equations. I didn't understand most of it, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't for school. She looked up when she heard me. Her eyes flicked to the whiteboard, then back to me, as if calculating how much I had seen. "What are you working on?" I asked again. She hesitated. Then, coolly, she said, "Just a project." "A project?" I repeated. "For school?" "Something like that." I folded my arms. Since when do school projects involve? I gestured at the mess of technology. In front of her, "Whatever this is," she sighed, wiping her hands on her jeans. You wouldn't get it. She wasn't lying. I really didn't get it. But something deep in my gut told me that whatever she was working on, it had nothing to do with school. I tried to brush it off. I told myself that Lily was just coping in her own way, that maybe she was throwing herself into a hobby to distract herself. But deep down, I knew better. Something was off. Over the next couple of days, I caught her doing things that made my skin crawl, things that didn't feel like the behavior of a child mourning the loss of her mother. I'd walk into a room, and she'd quickly minimize a screen on her laptop. She started spending more time in the garage, but whenever I got too close, she'd lock the door. She whispered into her phone at odd hours, and when I asked who she was talking to, she'd just shrug and say, "No one." Each time, I told myself to let it go. And then, on the third day, Emily called. It was late afternoon. I was in the kitchen, staring blankly out the window, still trying to figure out how to rebuild our lives. Lily was sitting at the dining table, glued to her tablet, completely immersed. When my phone rang, I almost ignored it until I saw the caller ID Emily. I felt my entire body tense. My first instinct was to let it ring. What could she possibly say to justify what she had done? But a sick part of me wanted to hear her squirm, so I answered. "What do you want?" My voice was colder than I intended, but I didn't care. "Oh my God, Brian, you have to help me." Her voice was frantic, desperate. Not the arrogant, self-assured woman who had emptied our daughter's college fund and run off with another man. I let out a bitter laugh. "Help you? You stole from us and disappeared. Why would I help you?" "Something's wrong," she cried. "Everything's gone wrong. Brian, please." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Nick is gone," she choked out. "Just disappeared, and all our accounts are frozen. I can't access anything. My cards don't work. My bank accounts are empty, and now the police are looking for me." I gripped the counter, my knuckles turning white. The police? I should have felt anger. I should have been livid that she had the audacity to call me for help after what she had done. But instead, I felt satisfaction. She was panicking. She was trapped. Good. Sounds like a real stand-up guy you ran off with, I said dryly. Brian, I didn't know this would happen, she sobbed. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You didn't mean to empty our daughter's college fund and run off with a scam artist. I shot back, because that seemed pretty intentional to me. There was silence. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I made a mistake. I barked out a laugh. A mistake? No, Emily, you made a choice. I was ready to end the call, to let her rot in whatever mess she had made for herself. But then, before I could hang up, I heard Lily's voice behind me. Put it on speaker, Dad. I turned around. Lily was standing there, tablet in hand, eyes calm and calculating. There was no sadness in her expression, no anger, just quiet confidence. Something about the way she said it, not a request but a command, made me hesitate. Why? I asked, my voice wary. She gave me that same small, knowing smile. Trust me. I swallowed hard, then pressed the speaker button. Emily, I said, you're on speaker now. Lily's here. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Lily. Emily's voice softened instantly. Sweetheart, it's Mommy. Save it. Lily's voice was cold, emotionless. I don't want to hear it. There was a heavy silence on the line. For the first time, Emily hesitated. Lily, she finally said, her voice cracking, I know I hurt you. I know I made a mistake, but you have to believe me. I never meant— You didn't just make a mistake, Lily cut in, her voice sharp, unwavering. You betrayed us. You stole from us. And now you're calling because you want help? That's pathetic. I stared at her, stunned. This wasn't the voice of a hurt child. This was something else. Emily let out a broken sob. Sweetheart, please, I didn't know this would happen. I didn't know Nick would— Lily let out a soft laugh. A cold, knowing laugh. Oh, I know, Mom. Nick had no idea either. That's what made it fun. The room suddenly felt smaller. I turned to her slowly. What do you mean, Lily? Glanced at me, then down at her tablet. Calm, collected, like she had been waiting for this moment. I told you, Dad, she said, tilting her head. I took care of it. I swallowed hard. Took care of what? She turned the tablet toward me. Bank statements, email correspondences, digital trails. At first, it didn't make sense. Then, the realization crashed into me like a tidal wave. She had done this. My 12-year-old daughter had hacked into Emily and Nick's financial records. She had drained their accounts, froze their assets, left them penniless. And worse, she had sent everything to the police: fraud, money laundering, wire transfers that painted Emily as an active participant in Nick's scams. She wasn't just abandoned. She was wanted. My throat went dry. Lily. How? She shrugged. It wasn't hard. Mom always used the same passwords for everything. Once I got into her email, the rest fell into place. Emily's breathing turned frantic. Lily, what did you do? I made sure you couldn't steal from us ever again, she said simply. There was a choked sob on the other end. Lily, Emily pleaded, you don't understand what you've done. Oh, I understand just fine, Lily said, unbothered. Emily gasped for air. They think I helped him. They think I was part of it. I have nothing left, Lily. No money, no home, nothing. Lily's lips curled into a smirk. Now, you know how it feels. I gripped the counter, my head spinning. This was too much, too fast. How had she done all of this? And why didn't she feel anything? I placed a hand on her shoulder. Lily, I said carefully, you could have told me. She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. You wouldn't have done anything. Her words sent a chill down my spine. She wasn't wrong. I had been paralyzed by the betrayal, stuck in my own pain, unable to act. But Lily? She had acted, and she hadn't just fought back. She had destroyed them. I stood there in stunned silence, my mind racing. Emily was still sobbing on the other end of the line. But Lily, she didn't care. She had taken everything from her mother without hesitation, without guilt. And the worst part? She was right. I wouldn't have done anything. I had been paralyzed by the betrayal, too consumed by anger and grief to act. But my 12-year-old daughter had stepped in, and she hadn't just fought back. She had completely dismantled them. But before I could process what this truly meant, the phone rang again. Not Emily this time. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering. Something felt off. The moment I picked up, I knew I had made a mistake. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" The voice was low, dangerous, filled with venom. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Nick. I gripped the phone tighter. "You got what you deserved." He let out a humorless laugh. "Deserved? You ruined my life. You and that little brat of yours." I glanced at Lily. She was still standing there, watching me, her expression unreadable. "You stole from people," I shot back. "You thought there wouldn't be consequences." Nick's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "I'm not going down alone." A cold pit formed in my stomach. "I know where you live, Brian. I know where your daughter goes to school. And if you think I'm just going to sit back and let you ruin me, you're dead wrong." I went completely still. Every hair on my body stood on end. This wasn't an empty threat. Nick was desperate, and desperate men were dangerous. I forced my voice to stay steady. "Stay away from my daughter," Nick chuckled. "Or what? You gonna let your little hacker deal with me too?" I hung up before he could say another word. My hands were trembling as I set the phone down on the counter. For a moment, I just stood there, trying to process what had just happened. Then I felt it. A presence. I turned. Lily was still standing there, still calm, still collected. But there was something different in her eyes now. Something cold. She wasn't scared. If anything, she looked amused. "Nick?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Swallowed hard. "He knows what you did, and now he's threatening us." Lily didn't flinch. She didn't even look surprised. Instead, she just smiled. "Let him try." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. "Lily," I said carefully, "this isn't a game. He's dangerous. We need to call the police." She shook her head. "The police won't do anything until it's too late. But don't worry, Dad." She picked up her tablet and turned toward the hallway. "I have one more move to make." And just like that, she disappeared into her room, closing the door behind her. I stood there, my heart pounding, my breath uneven. What did she mean? What was she planning? And, worst of all, how did she know exactly what to do? Lily locked herself in her room for hours. I knocked, called her name, even tried the handle. It was locked. "Lily," I said through the door, trying to keep my voice calm. "We need to talk about this. We need to call the police." Silence. Then, finally, she answered. "I told you, Dad. I'm handling it." Something in her tone made my stomach twist. I wanted to demand answers, to tell her this wasn't normal, that 12-year-olds shouldn't think like this. But the truth was, I was afraid of what I might hear. So I waited. That night, long after I had gone to bed, I heard it, the sound of clicking. I cracked my door open, peering down the hall. A faint blue light glowed under Lily's door. She was still working. The next morning, she came to breakfast, calm, focused, not like a kid who had just been threatened by a dangerous man, like someone who already had a plan. She sat down across from me, stirring her cereal absent-mindedly. "I need you to take me to the store today," she said. I frowned. "Why?" She met my gaze. "I need a burner phone." My stomach dropped. I set my coffee down. Lily, what exactly are you doing? She exhaled like she was dealing with a slow student. I told you. I'm fixing it. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to stay calm. Lily, this isn't your fight. Nick is a criminal. He's dangerous. She tilted her head slightly. And? I blinked. And? Lily, this isn't a game. If he finds out what you're doing, he won't. Her confidence sent a shiver down my spine. I took a breath, lowering my voice. Whatever you're planning, you need to stop. She just smiled. It's too late for that, Dad. I didn't have time to respond before the doorbell rang. My stomach dropped. Lily looked toward the door, then back at me. Unbothered. Don't. Answer it, I said instinctively. Lily stood up, walked to the door, peered through the peephole. Then, before I could stop her, she unlocked it and swung it open. Nick. He was bigger than I expected. Taller. His eyes were bloodshot. His clothes wrinkled. He looked desperate. Dangerous. His gaze flicked from me to Lily. And he smiled. There she is, he said, stepping forward. The little genius. I blocked his path, heart pounding. You need to leave. He ignored me. You think you can just ruin my life, kid? His tone was light, but there was an edge to it. You don't know who you're messing with. Lily crossed her arms, completely unfazed. Neither do you. I turned to her, lowering my voice. Lily, go to your room, now. But she didn't move. Instead, she reached into her pocket. Nick tensed. What do you think you're doing? Lily pulled out a small device, a tiny, sleek black box with a single red button. My breath caught in my throat. Lily, what is that? She didn't answer me. She just pressed the button. Nick's phone buzzed in his pocket. He frowned, pulling it out. His expression shifted from annoyance to confusion to fear. What the hell is this? Lily's lips curled into a small smile. Evidence. Nick's face turned red. You're bluffing. Lily tilted her head. Am I? His fingers trembled as he scrolled through his phone. Then his entire body went still. I stepped forward, glancing over his shoulder. My blood ran cold. Emails, wire transfers, conversations, everything. Lily hadn't just been gathering information. She had been tracking him, watching him, and now she had sent it all to the police. Nick's breath hitched. He looked at Lily, like he was seeing a ghost. You, his voice cracked. You little. The sound of sirens cut through the air. Nick spun toward the window. Red and blue lights filled the street. His entire body sagged. Lily stepped forward, standing inches from him, and spoke in a voice so cold it didn't belong to a 12-year-old. Checkmate. The door burst open, police flooded in, guns drawn. Nick didn't resist. He knew it was over. As they dragged him away, I stood there, staring at my daughter. Lily turned to me, expression unreadable. I told you, Dad. She set the device down. On the table, her voice soft. I had one more move to make. The house was eerily quiet after they took Nick away. The flashing red and blue lights faded, the sound of police radios disappearing into the night. But the silence left behind felt heavy. I closed the door, locking it twice, then turned to my daughter. She stood in the center of the living room, hands in the pockets of her hoodie, completely calm. Like nothing had just happened. Like she hadn't. Just single-handedly taken down a dangerous man. I swallowed hard. My throat was dry. I wanted to say something. Anything. Lily, I finally managed, my voice hoarse. What did you just do? She blinked up at me, tilting her head slightly. I told you, she said simply. I fixed it. Fixed it. Like this had just been another puzzle to solve. I ran a hand down my face, my pulse still racing. Lily, this wasn't some school project. This was real. You put yourself in serious danger, she shrugged. Not really. Not really, I let out. A short, disbelieving laugh. Nick was standing right there, Lily. If he had figured out what you did sooner, he could have. I stopped, not even wanting to say it out loud. She didn't flinch, didn't show even a flicker of fear. Instead, she just smiled. Smiled. And that's when it hit me. She was never afraid. Not once. Not when she found out her mother stole from us. Not when Nick threatened us. Not when she stood face to face with a dangerous man. She had been in control the entire time. And the worst part, she knew it. I exhaled shakily, sinking down onto the couch. My body felt heavy, tired. Lily, I said carefully, what you did, it was impressive, but it wasn't normal. She finally looked away, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. I don't know how to be normal. My chest tightened. I didn't know what to say to that. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of everything hanging between us. Then, finally, she spoke again. Are you mad at me? The question caught me off guard. I looked at her. At the brilliant, fearless, terrifyingly capable girl sitting across from me. Was I mad? No, I was terrified. Not of her, but of what she might become. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I don't even know how to answer that. She nodded, like she understood. That's okay. Then, just like that, she stood up and walked toward her room. Lily, I called after her. She stopped, glancing back. You don't always have to fix things, I said quietly. Sometimes it's okay to just let things be. She was silent for a moment. Then she gave me that same small, knowing smile. I don't know how to do that. And with that, she disappeared down the hall, leaving me alone with a terrifying thought. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a force to be reckoned with, and I had no idea what she would do next. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can come from those we least expect. This story reminds us that sometimes the people closest to us can hurt us the most, and when that happens, we have two choices. Let it break us or take control. But taking control doesn't mean losing yourself in revenge. Lily was brilliant, but at what cost? When facing betrayal, focus on rebuilding, not just on payback. Protect what matters, but don't let anger define you. True strength isn't just about winning battles. It's about knowing when to fight and when to move forward.